Hi, I'm Brian Lord, Senior Vice President of Premier Speakers Bureau. I'm happy to have on speaker, author, and former CEO of Southwest Airlines, Howard Putnam. Howard, how are you doing?
Hey, great, Brian. Good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. Now, normally I save my surprise question for somewhere in the middle, but for you, I'll make a special exception for that, and you'll probably get annoyed. You and I had lunch about 10 years ago, and you told me this story, and I'm sure it answers a question that's just annoying America right now. But does Howard Putnam, former CEO of Southwest, does Howard Putnam know how to fly a plane?
Yes, he does.
And how did you learn how to do that?
My dad taught me how on an Iowa farm in a Piper Cub when I
And
was
then
about 12.
when you were about 12?
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot that part. I thought you were a little bit older.
I couldn't fly by myself. I had to fly with him until I was soloed at 16. But
Now, did you know how to fly a plane or drive a car first?
I knew how to fly a plane first, actually.
Now, that's your opinion that you know how to fly a plane. What is your son's opinion?
My son's opinion is that I'm not qualified to fly a plane.
Well, what's that? Now, what's that story?
Well, my dad taught me how to fly, and then years later, I teach our son, Mike, how to fly. He goes on to Oklahoma State University to get his bachelor's degree and to get all his flying credentials. He gets his instructor's rating. And we now live in Plano, Texas, when we're with Southwest and Braniff. I hadn't flown in 5 years. We'd just taken Braniff through Chapter 11. I'm all stressed out. But I thought how great it would be to have your son check you out. We went out and flew for 3 hours and came back, and I pulled out my logbook and handed it to him, and he said, "I'm not signing that. You're not safe to fly by yourself." So, I've never flown since, and now he's a captain for U.S. Air.
Oh, very cool, very cool. Well, now back to on to the quote unquote real questions here. But in his new book, Great by Choice, Jim Collins talks about Southwest and specifically you in Chapter 6, and that you were very good about keeping the focus on the vision for the long term. Now, what was he referring to in that?
Well, I've never met Jim Collins, and I didn't even know he wrote about us until somebody sent me a copy of the book a couple of weeks ago. But what he's referring to is after airline deregulation, I was the second CEO of Southwest. And my role was to figure out what's the vision, what's the flight plan, what business are we really in, and how do you support a value proposition, no matter what the business is. So we did that. And what he really liked was that the simple little vision that we wrote defined what we were not going to be. We were not going to have first class. We were not going to have more than one kind of airplane. We were not going to have food service. We were not going to interline with other airlines on tickets and baggage. And his point is that many companies in turbulent times, they try to change everything. But that Southwest has stayed the course. That was 30 years ago that we wrote that little vision. And by his mathematics, Southwest has still retained 80% of what we defined we should be 30 years ago. So he held us up as a model as to how companies should look at transformation and stick to what you're doing instead of being all over the place.
Yeah. Now, that is one of the things that comes up is that, when you talk about, there's so many companies right now going through transformation in turbulent times. And what are things that companies can do to successfully transform themselves in turbulent times?
I'm going to be speaking with a health care group that one of your associates has booked me at just in a couple of weeks. And they say they're going to go through transformation, and they want me to talk about that. When we talked on the telephone, I said, "What do you want to transform?" Well, and then they begin to get rather cloudy on what the vision is. So I think what we're going to have to do with them is let's redefine the vision. What's the direction you're going to go? Now, are you sure that's what you want to do in healthcare with all the changes? Yes? Okay. Now we can begin to add the limbs to the tree as to how you're going to transform it. You're going to do it through facilities. You're going to do it through culture. You're going to do it through new business models, new business products. But people tend to be all over the lot in transformation. And Jim Collins said that what we did was the right way. We just kept it very narrow, focused, and simple. My dad always said on the Iowa farm, if you chase two rabbits, you won't catch either one. Just chase one rabbit. And has always been very good advice.
One of the other things that you and Southwest are very, very well known for is culture and the focus on culture. A lot of companies don't do that. Why was culture and why is culture so important to the success of Southwest Airlines?
The original flight attendants were the key to it. The original flight attendants were all females. And Southwest copied that from an airline in California called PSA at that time. So it wasn't an original Southwest idea. But that uniform, which was sort of like, as I say, the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders uniform today, attracted a certain kind of young lady. And they had all been cheerleaders, drum majorettes, baton twirlers, something like that in college. They were in show business, and they knew they were going to look good in the uniform when they came to fly. And we found out that they had great attitudes. They loved humor. They loved customers. So the people department sat down and interviewed a lot of them, and we came up with a personality profile. And the mantra over the door became higher attitudes develop their skills. Higher attitudes develop their skills. So if companies will have a well-defined, simple vision, figure out what business they're in, as we did. We were in mass transportation. Southwest is not an airline, mass transportation. Now, how do you support the value proposition? And we did it with our people. And we just implemented that personality profile across the board. They're all decision makers. They love to have a lot of freedom to make their own decisions. Don't micromanage them. That won't work. They make up their own stories, their own in-flight announcements. They love teamwork. They love to party. They love to have fun. And so Southwest hires all their employees that way now for the last, 29, 30 years. And it works.
One of the great things you also talk about is leadership. If people have been driving along in any major city in the country, they've seen your smiling face up there for those Get Motivated seminars. You and Rudy Giuliani and Colin Powell and a lot of other leaders up there. What do you think are the most important attributes of a leader?
I was on an airplane a while back sitting by a young man who had a company here in northern Nevada. And I said, how's it going? And he said, well, the company's doing well, but the people are driving me nuts. And I said, really? I said, have you ever had any training in leadership? No. And he was very defiant. So he said, give me a list of what you think would make a good leader. So I just extemporaneously wrote down on a piece of paper about 10 items that I thought were important. And he said, good, let me have the list. And I said, no, get your own piece of paper and write it down because you're not going to remember. But the number one thing I told him was honesty and integrity. Mm-hmm. And there's no way any leader can build trust unless you have a foundation of honesty and integrity. I got a lot of great training and experience on that Iowa farm at a young age, not only being taught how to fly, but running tractors, machinery, taking care of animals. And that taught me accountability, and that taught me responsibility. So now you've got integrity, honesty, accountability, responsibility. Then you can build the trust. The other thing I've seen in great leaders is, Steve Jobs, when he was alive at Apple, was his passion. And great leaders that sustain a company over the long term, they have a passion to inspire their people and the product or the service, whatever it is. And they've understood how important it is to have a vision and a flight plan. Authenticity. And it's in speaking. I always say, if you got to be the same off the stage as you are on the stage. Mm-hmm. And otherwise, as I learned recently at the Naval Academy, those young people are so hungry for leadership ideas. And I spent nearly an hour with them just visiting and talking. So you got to be authentic on and off. Team spirit. And then the other one I think is very important is developing your subordinates, developing more leaders. You ought to be able to walk out of your office if you're the CEO for 6 months and the organization just keeps going without you. If it falls on its face, then you haven't done your job to develop. And finally, I think a sense of humor. Got to laugh at yourself.
Yeah, and do you feel like that's even more important now in these sort of difficult economic times?
Yeah. Turbulence is when most transformations happen. We don't tend to make changes in good times. We wait until the costs are out of control, the economy's down, and then we say, what's wrong with the bottom line? We got to have a transformation around here. So, and you also got to have some fun around here. When we were taking Braniff through bankruptcy many, many years ago after Southwest, one of my senior officers that was always so funny was a fellow named Sam Coates. And Sam would come in every morning and he'd have a line for all of us just to get us laughing. And there was a movie out at that time called Airport or Airplane. And Sam would come in and say, what a week we picked to stop sniffing glue. What a week we picked to stop drinking, or whatever it was. And it always just got the tension out of the air, and we had a laugh, and then we moved on.
Well, now, some of the things that, you've mentioned a lot of great things that people will learn when they hear you speak. What are some of the tools and takeaways that audiences have when they hear you speak?
With the Naval Academy, there was one that really struck home with them, and it's not original from me, but I use the phrase, some play the game, others change the way the game is played. And which game are you going to be in? And that's what we did at Southwest. We decided to change the way the game was played and go completely opposite of what the airline industry was doing. That was one. Two, hire attitudes, develop the skills. People still hire too much for the resume. And look at what kind of a culture your company needs to support whatever your product or service is, and then go after those attitudes and develop them. The third thing is the communication process. Emails, etc., are so easy today, but I still believe in the power of the handwritten note and the power of a personal visit with your subordinates all. They will appreciate that from now on.
One of the things we're very big at here at Premier is making the event planner's life easier and making the event planner look good. What are some of the ways that you do that?
Well, when I'm working with you guys, I don't have to do much because you do it all for me. You're so good at that. But I always try to make myself available, as you know, on conference calls and so forth ahead of time, and spend as much time on the phone with them as they want. And then do a lot of research from their website and what their company's going through and all. And then I usually try to talk to several of the senior officers and be sure I'm getting the same story across the board. And in some cases, you'll want to talk to some customers as well. Sometimes it doesn't make any difference, but there are other times that the customers have so much input, and the client themselves may have missed what the customer was saying to them. I'll be there early. I love to go if they have a reception or something the evening before, stop in and meet the people, and I'll stick around after it's over and visit with the attendees as well, and just try to be a part of their family.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, I mean, for people watching this, I mean, we get that back, you hear that from event planners all the time about Howard, about, just because you are a good down-to-earth guy and, always willing to help and, make that connection. You're definitely not a bungee cord speaker who just kind of flies in, speaks, and then pops right back out. You actually do get to know the client ahead of time and say hello to the people there, and whether it's signing books or getting pictures taken, you're always great about being there for the attendees as well.
I just had an email last night from a lady that I will not name that I was just at a conference in Fort Lauderdale today, and when I filled out the evaluation form, I said they need to have Howard speak at next year's meeting. And she signed her name to the email. I could not place her. I mean, there was no company. So I emailed her and I said, I got to confess, I can't put your name with whatever event it was that you heard me speak. And she came back and gave me the name of the event. It had been 6 years ago in Chicago. But I remembered it. And I remembered a couple of things that happened at the event. And so things like that make a difference with the clients. And she came right back and how appreciative she was that I remembered it then.
Howard, thanks so much for doing this interview. It's been a pleasure, and we look forward to helping bring you to our clients soon.
It was great to visit your offices recently and meet all of your team and Thanks very much for all the hospitality.
You're welcome. Thanks again, Howard.
Okay, bye.